The notification hit my phone at 6:41 p.m., right as I was setting the rosemary bread on the table. A group text titled, "Sunday Dinner Family Only," lit up with my sister's name at the top. Kelsey, just so everyone knows, no one is talking to Claire about finances anymore. She thinks money can buy everything. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language, because the only reason anyone in my family ever mentioned finances around me was to ask for something, and because I hadn't said a single word about money, not once, not at all. I slid my phone face down beside my plate and walked into the dining room with the bread basket in both hands, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. It was Sunday, January 11th, the kind of cold that makes your lungs feel sharp. We were at my parents' house, same split level in Maplewood, a New Jersey, same scratch on the kitchen doorway from when Kelsey and I were kids, and I slammed my tricycle into it. Same family tradition, pot roast, too much wine, and my sister performing emotional gymnastics for an audience. Only this time, she had decided the show needed a villain, me, and I already knew why. Act 1, the betrayal, the dinner. Dinner officially started at 7:03 p.m. because my mother insists on waiting until every seat is filled, like we're in a Norman Rockwell painting instead of a house where resentment drips from the crown molding. My dad sat at the head of the table, carving. My mom fluttered between the stove and the table, apologizing for everything. My brother Adam hunched over his plate like the meal might get snatched away. And Kelsey, my older sister by 3 years, the family's sun and storm, sat in her usual spot on my parents' right with her husband Roberto on her left. Roberto was the kind of man who always wore his watch slightly too tight, the kind who said things like asset allocation at barbecues, the kind who smiled when he wasn't listening. My husband Ethan sat beside me, 15 years together, 10 years married. He reached for my hand under the table. His palm was damp. I noticed that. I noticed everything. Kelsey waited until my mom had finished saying grace, something about gratitude and family and keeping our hearts soft, before she set down her fork with theatrical precision. "I have an announcement," she said. My mom clasped her hands. "Oh my God, what? Are you pregnant?" Kelsey smiled like she'd been waiting for that line. "No, don't be ridiculous," Roberto chuckled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Kelsey's gaze slid across the table and landed on me, pinning me in place. "I'm just done," she said. "I'm done with certain people using money to control everyone." I blinked. "What?" She didn't answer me. She addressed the room like I wasn't there. "I think it's disgusting," Kelsey continued, "how some people pretend to be humble, but they're actually manipulating." Adam cleared his throat. "Kels." She held up a hand. "No, let me finish." I looked at my husband. Ethan's eyes were fixed on his plate. "Some of us work hard," Kelsey said, her voice tightening. "And some of us," her eyes flicked to me again, "get to play pretend. Like we don't know what we're doing." My mom frowned. "Kelsey, honey, what are you talking about?" Kelsey's mouth twisted. I'm talking about the fact that Claire has been lying to all of you for years." My heart thumped once, heavy and slow. "About what?" I asked, still calm, still smiling, because I honestly thought this was about my old habit of downplaying my career. I'm a graphic designer. I used to say it like it was a hobby. I'd tell my family I did some freelance. It made life easier. Less questions, less requests. Kelsey leaned forward. "She's been making all this money," she said, "and instead of helping family, she's been hoarding it. She's been acting like she's better than us." I set down my fork carefully. "Kelsey, I've helped. When you asked." She laughed, sharp, almost delighted. "When I asked?" she echoed. "Oh, that's cute. Like you're the gatekeeper. Like you get to decide who deserves what." Roberto finally looked up. "Kelsey, it maybe..." She cut him off. "No, because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of her sitting there judging." My dad's face darkened. "Claire doesn't judge." Kelsey's eyes narrowed at him like he'd betrayed her. "Oh, Dad, of course you'd say that. You're her favorite." That was a lie, but Kelsey had always needed a scapegoat and an audience. She built her life around it. Then she turned to me fully, and in the clearest voice, with a smile as bright as broken glass, my sister said, "Get out. Money can't buy you family." The room went dead quiet. Even the fridge hum sounded loud. My mom gasped. "Kelsey," Adam whispered. "Jesus Christ." Ethan's fingers tightened around mine under the table. I didn't pull away. I didn't ask why. Because the moment she said it, I understood. This wasn't about money. This was about power. And Kelsey wouldn't have swung that hard unless she thought she'd already won. I leaned back in my chair slowly, still smiling. Okay, I said softly, if that's what you want. Kelsey's nostrils flared. She expected tears. She expected begging. She expected me to make a scene so she could point at it and say, see, that's who she is. Instead, I picked up my napkin, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and placed it on the table like a closing statement. I'm going to head home, I said. Thanks for dinner. My mom's voice cracked. Claire, don't, please. Kelsey's eyes glittered. Good. Ethan stood up too fast, chair legs scraping. Claire. I squeezed his hand once. A quiet warning, sit. Then I looked across the table, past Kelsey, past Roberto, and met my father's eyes. He looked confused, hurt, and for the first time, something crystallized inside me. Not rage, not despair, clarity, because I realized someone had been feeding her a story. A story with just enough truth to sound real, and only one person at that table knew my finances well enough to twist them into a weapon. I stood, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, and slipped my phone into my pocket. As I walked out, Kelsey called after me, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Enjoy your money, Claire, it won't keep you warm." I paused at the doorway, turned just slightly, and gave her a polite nod, still smiling, because I had no intention of letting her see the moment my world shifted. I stepped into the freezing night air, and I decided, right there on my parents' porch at 7:26 p.m., that I would not destroy anything. I would simply let the truth destroy them. All Act T2, The Discovery, What I Found. Ethan drove home in silence. Our townhouse was 15 minutes away in a quiet development where every porch light looked like it belonged to a catalog. The moment the front door shut behind us, he said, "Claire." I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "I need you to tell me," I continued, "why your hand was sweating at the table." He blinked. "What?" "I noticed," I said, "you were nervous before Kelsey even spoke." He swallowed. "It's been stressful." I walked into the kitchen, placed my keys in the bowl, and turned to face him. "Did you tell her something about my business?" I asked. His eyes flicked to the side, barely, but enough. There it was, that tiny crack, the kind that becomes a fault line if you press. I kept my voice neutral. "Gee, Ethan," he exhaled. "I might have mentioned you've been doing better than you let on." My stomach tightened. "Why?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "Because she and Roberto were talking about refinancing. They were saying your parents might need help soon. And I said you could probably cover it if things got bad." A chill crawled up my spine. Not because of the money, because of the assumption, the casual entitlement, the way he said you could cover it like it was already decided. I nodded slowly. "So you offered my money without asking me?" "I didn't offer." "You did," I cut in, still quiet. "And now she thinks I've been withholding." He stepped closer. "Claire, I was trying to make you look good." I stared at him. "For 15 years, I said, you've watched my family treat me like the backup plan, like the quiet one. Oh, and you thought the way to fix that was, what, hand them my bank statements?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and something else hit me, something sharp and specific. "Kelsey wouldn't have said what she said," I whispered, "unless she knew something that made her feel righteous." Ethan's throat bobbed. "Claire," he said, and there it was, the first time he used my name like a plea. My hands didn't tremble. I walked past him up the stairs into my office. Because my office wasn't just an office, it was where I kept the version of my life my family didn't know existed. I owned a small branding consultancy, Marigold and Company. I'd started it 3 years ago after quietly freelancing for a decade. We built brand identities for small businesses, then mid-sized. Then we landed a contract with a regional hotel group. And last year, Marigold and Company cleared $3.2 million in revenue. Not because I was flashy, because I was relentless. And because I'd learned early, if you're the nice daughter, people will spend you like loose change. I opened my laptop, logged into the company email, and typed one name into the search bar, Kelsey. A few harmless hits popped up, holiday newsletters, generic stuff. Then I typed another, Roberto, more hits, but one caught my eye. A forwarded email from Ethan dated 6 months earlier. Subject line, Investor Dinner / Marigold. My chest tightened. I clicked. It was a chain between Ethan and Roberto. Ethan had written, "Claire doesn't like to talk about it, but Marigold's doing extremely well. She's looking at expanding, possibly investing in hospitality." Roberto responded, "Interesting. Does she own it outright? Any partners?" Ethan, She owns it, mostly keeps it under wraps, family stuff. Roberto, got it, appreciate it. My skin went cold. Ethan, I called out, voice level. He appeared in the doorway. His face was already guilty, like he'd been holding it in for months, and my question simply opened the cage. Did you send Roberto information about my company? I asked. He hesitated. That was enough. I turned my laptop so he could see the email chain. His shoulders sagged. I didn't think it mattered. I stared at him. You didn't think it mattered that you told my sister's husband, who works in finance, details about my business? He ran a hand through his hair. Roberto said he was looking for investors. No, I said, you were looking for approval. That landed. I saw it land. And then I asked the question I hadn't wanted to ask. What else did you tell them? Ethan's silence stretched too long. I leaned back in my chair. The thing about betrayal, I said softly, is that it doesn't come with fireworks at first. It comes with small permissions, small betrayals that people justify. He took a step forward. Claire, please. I looked at him and I saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. I'm going to sleep in the guest room, I said. He reached out. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I replied. I'm just paying attention. That night, while Ethan lay downstairs pretending to sleep, I stayed up until 2:17 a.m. doing something I'd never done in 10 years of marriage. I looked. I checked his iPad, still synced to his phone. I didn't have to guess his passcode. It was our anniversary. And I found the messages between Ethan and Kelsey first. At 3:17 p.m. the day before dinner, Kelsey. Tomorrow, don't chicken out. Ethan. I'm not. Just be careful. Kelsey. Careful. She needs to be put in her place. Put in her place. My stomach turned. Then I found the messages between Ethan and Roberto. Plans, lunches, catch-ups, and finally, the message thread that cracked the whole thing open. It wasn't saved under a name. It was saved under a number. And the last message was from that afternoon. Room 108 is booked. Same hotel, same deal. My throat went tight. Room 108, same hotel, same deal. I clicked the number and pulled up the details. The contact card had a name attached. Vanessa H. The next morning at 8:06 a.m., I called in sick to my own life. I went to my office downtown, Suite 1402, in a converted warehouse in Newark, and I sat with my COO, Maya, a woman who once negotiated a six-figure contract while pumping breast milk in a supply closet. Maya, I said, I need you to pull every expense report Ethan has ever submitted through Marigold. Her brows lifted. That's specific. I'm paying you to be competent, I said gently, not to ask why. Maya nodded once. Give me an hour. While she worked, I Googled Vanessa H. and cross-referenced with Ethan's contacts. It didn't take long. Vanessa Hargrove, Customer Service Director, Harborline Hotels, the regional hotel group we'd contracted with last year, the one whose branding overhaul had earned us our biggest revenue spike, the one Ethan had attended meetings with because he liked feeling important. And I sat back slowly, a strange calm settling into my bones. This wasn't just infidelity, this was an ecosystem, a web of access, money, and arrogance. And my sister, my sweet, righteous sister, had used Sunday dinner to shove me out of the family narrative so she could take my place. I didn't cry. I simply opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Project Sunday. At 9:14 a.m., Maya walked in and set a printed stack of papers on my desk. Claire, she said, voice tight, you're going to want to see this. There were charges, hundreds over months, hotel stays, fancy dinners, client entertainment. But what stood out were 3 invoices from Harborline Hotel, Maplewood. Each one had the same note. Room 108, dates, August 4th to 6th, October 12th to 13th, December 19th to 20th, all billed to Marigold. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. A year's worth of trust collapsed into a single room number. Maya sat across from me. You want me to confront him? I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I want you to help me document. Maya's eyes hardened. Okay. And then, because the universe has a cruel sense of timing, my office phone rang. It was Harborline Hotels corporate. A man named Bradley Pierce, a regional operations manager, asking to confirm an upcoming investor event. I'm calling about the Harborline Partners Dinner, he said. You're still attending, correct? January 28th, 6:30 p.m., Harborline Grand Ballroom. My heart gave a slow, satisfied thump. I had my public stage, and suddenly I had my first ally too, because Bradley sounded tired in a way I recognized. Yeah, the tired of someone who'd been lied to but hadn't found proof yet. I asked carefully, Bradley, a quick question, is Vanessa Hargrove still in charge of guest relations? There was a pause. Then he said, yes, and his voice turned slightly clipped. Why? I leaned back, staring at the evidence on my desk. Because, I said, calm as glass, I think you and I might need to compare notes. Act 3. The Strategic Revenge, The Noose Tightens. Bradley met me that afternoon at 1:12 p.m. at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Harbor Line corporate office. He was tall, early 40s, wedding ring missing, with the kind of face that had been handsome before stress carved it up. He didn't waste time. I'm going through a divorce, he said, sitting down, and I'm 90% sure my ex-fiancée was cheating. I didn't flinch. With Vanessa? His eyes widened slightly. How? I'm not guessing, I said. I'm confirming. I slid him a copy of the Room 108 invoices, blacking out Marigold's account numbers but leaving the dates and location. Bradley's jaw tightened. Room 108, he murmured. Jesus. He pulled out his phone, opened his photo app, and showed me a screenshot. A calendar invite Vanessa had accidentally emailed him 6 months ago. It read, Dinner, Ethan S. Marigold. Location, Harbor Line Maplewood, 7:45 p.m. Bradley's hand shook slightly as he scrolled. I thought she was networking, he said. She said it was for the company. My voice stayed even. They always say that. We sat there in silence for a moment, 2 people staring at the same betrayal from different angles. Then Bradley looked at me. What are you going to do? I sipped my coffee slowly. I'm going to do it right, I said. No screaming, no wrecking property, no threats. Bradley laughed once, bitter. So sorry, what? So I'm going to build a room they can't lie their way out of, I replied, and I'm going to invite witnesses. That was the beginning. Phase 1 was quiet documentation. Maya helped me compile expense reports. Bradley, through his position, accessed internal booking records, perfectly legal because he had authorization for compliance audits. We found patterns. Vanessa and Ethan weren't just meeting. They were using corporate resources. They'd booked client dinners on nights there were no clients. They'd charged spa packages. They'd tagged Roberto as financial consultant, despite him having no official contract. And my sister, Kelsey, appeared in the threads too, not in emails, in reimbursements. A family dinner at a steakhouse that cost $842.17, submitted by Ethan, approved by Vanessa. The note read, Strategy Meeting, Kelsey R. My sister wasn't just lashing out. She was in on it. Phase 2 was containment. I didn't confront Ethan. I didn't change my behavior. I didn't hint I knew. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings. I made dinner. I laughed at his jokes. I stayed the version of me he thought was manageable. Because people like Ethan don't confess out of guilt. They confess when they think you're too weak to punish them. And I needed him confident. Phase 3 was preparation. The Harbor Line Partners Dinner on January 28th wasn't just a dinner. It was where Harbor Line announced new investors, new brand direction, and, most importantly, new leadership appointments. Vanessa was being considered for a promotion to VP of Guest Experience. Roberto was courting Harbor Line's CFO, trying to position himself as an outside consultant. And Ethan, my husband, had been telling everyone he helped build Marigold. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I drafted a single email to Harbor Line's legal department. Subject line, compliance concern, misuse of corporate resources. I attached only a small piece of evidence. 1 invoice, 1 date, 1 room number. Then I added a sentence. I will present full documentation at the partners' dinner if necessary. I didn't threaten, I didn't beg. I simply placed a chess piece on the board. And then I waited. 3 days later at 4:22 p.m., Vanessa called Ethan right in front of me. Yet he answered on speaker without thinking. Ethan, Vanessa said, voice too sweet, we need to talk about January 28th. Ethan's face went slightly pale. Yeah, what about it? It's sensitive, she said. Can you meet me at the hotel tonight, room? She stopped herself. I smiled into my tea. Ethan swallowed. Text me. He hung up and looked at me. Everything okay? I asked, soft, attentive wife. He forced a laugh. Yeah, work stuff. Of course, I said. My hands didn't tremble. Something crystallized inside me again because now I knew. They felt the pressure, and pressure makes liars sloppy. Phase 4 was the humiliation cycle. Not all at once, not dramatic like a movie, but controlled. On January 20th, I ran into Roberto at a cafe near his office at 12:10 p.m. I smiled, ordered my drink, and casually said, Oh, Roberto, quick question. Have you ever been to Harborline Maplewood's room 108? I heard it's their most requested room. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost impressive. He laughed too loudly. No idea what you're talking about. What a coincidence, I said, still smiling. I'll ask Ethan. He seems to know the hotel well. Roberto left without finishing his coffee. On January 23rd, I invited my parents and Adam to lunch at my office. I didn't mention Kelsey. I just talked, quietly, calmly, about expanding Marigold, about possibly investing in commercial property. My father looked proud. My mother looked stunned. Adam said, Wait, you're actually, rich? I laughed softly. Comfortable? My mom's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell us? Because, I said gently. Every time Kelsey heard I had something, she treated it like it belonged to her. My father's jaw tightened. For the first time in years, I felt something shift, not in me, but in them. A recalibration. Phase 5 was the final stage. The public room, the partners' dinner. Act 4, the confrontation, the big reveal. January 28th arrived icy and bright. The Harborline Grand Ballroom smelled like expensive flowers and staged ambition. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a podium with the Harborline logo. I arrived at 6:22 p.m. in a black dress and calm makeup. Ethan arrived 10 minutes later, already sweating. Vanessa stood near the bar in a red dress that screamed confidence. Roberto hovered near the CFO like a shark pretending to be a goldfish. Kelsey came too, uninvited. Oh, of course, wearing a cream-colored blazer and the smile of someone who believed she was about to inherit my role in the family. I moved through the room like I belonged there, because I did. At 6:47 p.m., Bradley approached me with 2 men in suits. Claire, this is Harborline's general counsel and head of compliance. I shook their hands. They looked serious. Good. At 7:10 p.m., the CEO took the stage and began the usual speech about growth, synergy, vision. I barely listened, because I was watching Kelsey watch me. She kept glancing like she couldn't reconcile why I wasn't hiding in shame like she'd ordered me to. At 7:23 p.m., the CEO announced, and now we'll be recognizing key partners, starting with Marigold and Company, whose brand overhaul contributed to a 17% increase in regional bookings. Polite applause. Ethan straightened like he was about to accept a medal. Then the CEO said, Claire Sullivan, founder and CEO of Marigold & Co., please join us. Ethan froze. My sister's mouth parted slightly. I stood and walked to the stage. No rush, no nerves. I took the microphone, smiled at the crowd, and said, Thank you. Before I speak about the partnership, I need to address a compliance concern that affects Harborline's integrity. The room stilled. Vanessa's hand tightened around her wine glass. I continued, voice calm. For the past 18 months, corporate resources have been used to facilitate personal relationships, hotel rooms, dinners, reimbursements, under false pretenses. A murmur ran through the ballroom like wind over dry grass. I looked directly at Vanessa. Her face went pale. Then I looked at Ethan. Yet he stared at me like he didn't recognize me. I didn't cry, I said into the microphone, voice carrying. When I found out my husband was using my company's accounts to fund his affair, I didn't scream. I simply waited until everyone who needed to see the truth was in the same room. Kelsey whispered, Oh my God. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folder, clean, labeled, tabbed. I handed it to Harborline's general counsel standing at the side of the stage. Room 108, I said clearly, August 4th, October 12th, December 19th, charged to Marigold, approved by Vanessa Hargrove. Vanessa's lips trembled. This is insane. The CEO's face darkened. Vanessa? Ethan stood abruptly, chair scraping. Claire, what are you doing? I looked at him, still calm, ending the lie. Then I turned to the crowd again. And there's one more thing, I said, because this didn't start in this ballroom. It started at my parents' house, where my sister screamed at me, Get out! Money can't buy you family. I paused, letting that settle. She was right, I continued. Money can't buy you family, but it can reveal who thinks they can sell you. Kelsey shot to her feet. You don't get to... Oh, I do, yeah, I said gently. I pulled out one more document. A month ago, I said, my grandmother's trust finalized the transfer of the Harborline Maplewood property into my name. The room collectively inhaled. because Harborline Maplewood wasn't just a hotel, it was one of their flagship regional properties, and I owned it. Vanessa's knees visibly buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair. Roberto's face went gray. Ethan looked like he might vomit. Kelsey's voice cracked. "That's a lie," I smiled. "It's not." I handed the deed transfer summary to the general counsel as well. "My grandmother invested early," I said. "She left me the controlling interest. I didn't announce it because I didn't need applause, but now it matters." Bradley's eyes flicked between Vanessa and the paperwork, satisfaction tight in his jaw. Then the CEO spoke, voice low and lethal. "Vanessa," he said, "step outside now." Vanessa's mouth opened. No sound came out. Roberto tried to edge away. A compliance officer, one of Bradley's colleagues, moved in front of him. Ethan's voice broke. "Claire, please, don't do this here." I looked at him. 10 years of marriage sat between us like ash. "You did it here," I said softly. "You just didn't think I'd speak." Kelsey's eyes filled with furious tears. "Yup, you're humiliating us." I tilted my head. "No, Kelsey, I'm humiliating liars. You're just standing too close." She lunged toward the stage, but Adam, my brother, quiet Adam, appeared at the edge of the aisle and caught her elbow. "Stop," he said, voice hard. "Just stop." My mother was standing now too, hand over her mouth. My father looked like stone. And for the first time in our lives, Kelsey realized she didn't have the room. She didn't have the narrative. She didn't have the family, not anymore. I handed the microphone back, nodded politely, and stepped off the stage. Behind me, the ballroom buzzed with the sound of reputations snapping. Act 5, Resolution and Reflection 6 months later. The immediate fallout was surgical. Harborline placed Vanessa on administrative leave that night. 3 weeks later, she was terminated for misuse of resources and falsifying reimbursement approvals. Roberto's consulting dreams evaporated. Harborline's CFO wouldn't take his calls. His firm began an internal review after the compliance department flagged his involvement. Ethan, my Ethan, came home that night and cried on the kitchen floor. I didn't. I sat at the table, hands folded, and listened. The next morning at 9 a.m., I filed for divorce. No yelling, no drama, just paperwork. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a pen. Kelsey tried to call me 14 times in 2 days. Then she showed up at my office, mascara streaked, voice shaking. "Claire, you ruined my marriage," she said. I stared at her through the glass of my conference room, Maya beside me. "Kelsey," I said, calm. "Yes, you tried to ruin my life because you thought it would make you feel important." She slammed a hand on the table. "You think you're better than us." "No," I said. "I think I'm done being used." She whispered, "Mom won't talk to me." I breathed out slowly. "Money can't buy you family," I said, repeating her words back to her. "But it can buy you distance." Then I opened the door and asked security to escort her out. I kept my moral high ground. I didn't leak things to social media. I didn't smear anyone publicly beyond the compliance truth I had to present. The consequences unfolded because their actions were documented, not because I became cruel. 6 months later, July 28th, I stood on the balcony of a small condo I'd bought in Hoboken, watching the sunset slice the Hudson into gold. Marigold and Company had expanded. Yes, we signed 2 new hospitality clients, ironically, competitors of Harborline. I retained ownership of Harborline Maplewood through the trust transfer and negotiated a clean lease arrangement. I didn't destroy the hotel, I improved it. Because the best revenge isn't burning down the house, it's owning the deed and deciding what gets built next. Ethan moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and, according to Adam, looks like a man who realized too late that comfort isn't love. Vanessa tried to find work in hospitality. Word travels in that industry. She relocated to another state. Roberto and Kelsey's marriage cracked under pressure. Not because I pushed, it was already rotten. They separated quietly in May. My parents changed. They started calling me more, not to ask for things, just to talk. My father apologized once, awkwardly, all for not seeing it sooner. I told him honestly, I didn't want you to see it. I thought keeping quiet kept the peace. But peace built on silence is just a hostage situation with nicer plates. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your trust in others. It forces you to confront the ways you betrayed yourself every time you stayed small so someone else could feel big. I used to think dignity meant absorbing everything without reaction. Now I know dignity can also mean documentation, boundaries, and walking away without begging for people who only love you when you're useful. Money can't buy you family, but it can buy you the freedom to stop auditioning for one. And for the first time in years, I felt warm, without anyone else's approval to light the fire.